Hey everybody, I'm looking at the attendance list and I see it's filling up. We've got a few people still coming in here, so I'll go ahead and kind of do the preliminary stuff before we get started for good. If you can hear me, pop in a comment. I can't remember if you guys see the chat or the Q&A button on your screen, but pop me a comment in here if you can hear me and see me okay and see the screen okay. I always like to make sure of that before I get started. I don't quite trust the technology. So like I said, if you can hear me and see me and all that, if everything looks okay, go ahead and pop that in and we'll get started shortly. All right, we've got them coming in. Looks like everybody can see me and hear me, and it's all good. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So thanks for everyone joining today on our newest webinar, Concealment Strategies for Wildlife Photography. I'm Russell Graves, and I think I've got it fixed now. Instead of showing Russell Nordstrand on the screen, it actually has my name on there to show as your presenter. And look, I got to tell you, I'm pretty proud today because in the past, a couple of weeks ago, I did one from Childress, Texas, because I was on the road on a magazine shoot, and I had to do one from a hotel conference room. Most of the time I do these from, my wife and I own a business, and we've got a building in town in Bonham, Texas, and most of these I've been doing from there. But today, for the first time ever, I'm proud to say that I'm actually broadcasting from the world headquarters of russellgraves.com, because we finally finished our house and we're in the process of moving in, but we're living here now. We're still unpacking a few boxes, and that's in my office here in the house. That's why the walls are so bare and you don't see any pictures of wildlife photography on the walls. That'll come soon enough, but right now I'm just proud to be broadcasting from here, and we've got a really neat house and a really neat property, and everything's working out exactly like we planned. So you guys are the first ones that get to hear the first presentation from the brand new world headquarters of russellgraves.com. So, and another thing we're going to do today is, as I talk through these things, if you've been on these things before, you know how it is. I always like to make it more of a dialogue instead of a monologue. I know there's some limitations here on how we communicate with one another. So if you don't mind, as I go through this thing, if you have any specific questions, be sure to answer those. I've got this, what I can see on my side is I can see the screen, I can see myself, I can see the list of attendees, and I can see the questions that you guys pop in. So as you come up with questions to this presentation, write them in there. I always like to address them right then. I always save room at the end for Q&A, but if you've got questions, I like to answer them right when the topic comes up instead of saving them for later. So, one more thing I'm going to say before I get started officially is if you were with me last week, I think it was last week, I had a little trouble with the video stuff, and I think I've got that problem worked out. So we're going to try video again today. I've got a couple of videos that really illustrate some of my points that I'm going to talk about in this presentation. And if you do me the favor of when I start to play those videos, I've got to switch back and forth to some screens. But when I play those videos, if you'll do me a favor of just letting me know, someone pop in there that if you can hear and see it good, just let me know that as well. Because last week we had some delay and the sound wasn't working good, but I think we've got all that worked out. So I think that will actually work today. Come to find out, it's not the technology is the problem, it's user error. It was something I was doing wrong. So I think I've got all that worked out. But again, when the videos start to play, just let me know as that pops in. So let's go ahead and get started. Again, today's presentation is Concealment Strategies for Wildlife Photography. My name's Russell Allen Graves. I'm coming to you live from Dodge City, Texas. And one of the things, when I first started taking pictures of wildlife, I didn't have the luxury of being able to travel like I do today and go to places where wildlife is used to being around people. And so for me, early on especially, I started wildlife photography with three key things, really. One, the biggest lens I had was a 200 millimeter lens, and that was shooting film. And so I didn't have a really big telephoto, number one. Number two, the second thing I had, which I think we'll talk a little bit about today, was I had a pretty good knowledge of wildlife and understood how to get close. And number three, I own some camouflage. And so early on, I started trying to hone my techniques for getting closer to wildlife, especially when you're talking about wildlife that's either truly wild or a little bit wild. And you know, you go to places like Yellowstone and you see wildlife there that's accustomed to being around people, and they don't really bother you that bad. But there's some things we'll talk about today where if you'll do a few things, it'll really help keep the animals at ease. I know a couple of weeks ago, I was with a group in Smoky Mountain National Park, and we saw lots of turkeys, saw lots of bears. We saw, I think, 12 or 13 black bears in 2 days there. And, you know, even then, even though those animals are used to seeing people, we still handle ourselves in such a way that we're going to be able to maximize our efforts whenever those animals show up. So today, again, I'm going to talk about concealment strategies, how to hide better. And then number one, when you're shooting pictures of truly wild animals. And number two, a few strategies on, you know, how to handle yourself even when the animals are used to seeing people, how to kind of keep them at ease so you can get a more natural look of the animals. So let's talk about the basics. And this is something I talk about with a lot of people, especially when we're on a backcountry journeys trip, is when you're around wildlife. Here's the main thing. Even if they're used to seeing people, if you'll just move slow, the animal will stay relaxed, and you can get a lot better shots for a lot longer time before they move off. I know how it gets sometimes. You're really excited. We may see something for the very first time, and you want to rush out there and take pictures. But again, I try to emphasize moving slow and just being relaxed and not making direct eye contact, particularly if it's a prey species, because you got to think about it. If you're in, say, I'm going to Yellowstone next week. If you're in Yellowstone and you're a bison, and about the only thing you ever see moving close to you at a quick rate of speed are wolves. And so they're automatically attuned to responding to something that's moving at them quick. So again, when you're around wildlife, one of the things you can do, even if it's truly wild wildlife, I mean, on my property here, I see a lot of birds and a lot of, including owls that are wild. I mean, you can't go up and pet them. But as long as you move slow around them and kind of tolerate them, they'll be. It surprises you how taller animals are. So that's really the big thing that I can emphasize on the concealment strategies is to move slow. Number two, one of the things I like to do, particularly Canon cameras, and I never have understood why Canon's this way, but Canon makes all their big lenses white. And so I'm not a big fan of that. So one of the things I've always tried to do is keep my gear covered. And you can buy products like lens coats that they're neoprene covers that I buy for my bigger lenses that I'll put on those lenses to help cover the gear. And again, just really what you're trying to do is some of those colors that animals don't necessarily see natural in the environment, as you're moving slow, some kind of flash of a non-neutral color like a white may get their attention. And I try to avoid that, because once you get their attention, you know, a lot of times they'll start acting nervous. And then another thing I do a lot, again, whether it's truly wild animals or animals that are accustomed to being around people, I just use shadows to my advantage. So if you can move into a shadow and be able to use the shadows and stay in the shadows as much as you can, that'll put the animal at ease, because what they get nervous about is when there's just a big sore thumb sticking out there, and the proverbial sore thumb sticking out there. And so, you know, again, I use shadows to my advantage. And then the fourth thing is really, from a basic standpoint, is just understand the animal. You know, some animals have a lot less of a tolerance of being the willingness to be close to people than other animals do. You know, like this cottontail rabbit in this picture we're looking at here. These cottontails, because I never harass them in my yard. This is where I used to live, where I took this picture, because I don't harass them in my yard, and I just walk around them all the time and never really make direct eye contact at them. Never walk directly towards them, and really try to maintain a non-threatening posture around them. Then they finally get used to being around you. And so since I understand the animals and understand that doing those things that they can interpret as being aggressive, I try to avoid those kind of behaviors. Then eventually they just get used to being around me, and you can take pretty dynamic shots of like this one feeding on some rescue grass. Jeff says the new Olympus 1-400 Pro is white and reflective coating. Have you noticed the lens coats affecting your lenses? if you're talking about the covering that I put around my cameras, then I really haven't noticed that. Really, what the covering does to cover up the white on my lens is that it just protects the lens long term. If you mean the lens coating like on the glass itself, one of the things I always try to do is keep the lens hood on it, and that at least the reflective part of the lens, the glass itself, by putting the lens hood on, it reduces that direct light on the lens element, and so it's going to reduce some reflections overall. That's a good question, by the way. Just a few more wildlife shots. By the way, all these pictures I'll show you today were taken with one or more of the strategies that we're going to talk about in terms of how to hide, what the best effective ways to hide are, what are, again, some concealment strategies for wildlife. So all of these were taken with some of these strategies we'll talk about today. One of the things I didn't mention in the basics, because I knew I'd mention it here, is wear drab colored clothing. Try to avoid bright colors. And when people ask me what my favorite color is, I tell them the same thing every time. My favorite color is camouflage. I just love camouflage clothing and have since I was a little kid, and love all the patterns available. And really right now we live in the good old days of camouflage. There are more patterns available that will help match to your surroundings than there ever has been in the history of mankind. And one thing I encourage people to do is match the camouflage to your terrain. You can go, there's several different camo manufacturers. The two biggest ones in the marketplace right now is a company called Realtree. They license a camo pattern that is put on a lot of different products, including camera products. And the other one is a company called Mossy Oak. And those two companies are the big players. They don't really manufacture anything, but they license these patterns, these camouflage patterns, to be able to put on other products. And so if you go into a Cabela's or Bass Pro Shops or Shields or Sportsman's Warehouse or whatever retailer is there, you'll go in and see a vast array of not only different clothing options, but also different camouflage patterns. And so when you're picking out your camouflage patterns, one of the things I do is try to match it to my terrain. And I found these this morning. These are from the Mossy Oaks website. These are 3 of the probably 8 or 10 different patterns that they make. And so you've got kind of a woodlands pattern there on the left, which would work great in these southern hardwoods like where I live. You've got in the upper right, it's more kind of an open pattern, sort of a rocky look, which works great more out west. And then in the lower right, it's more of a, in the lower right, you're looking at more of a wetlands pattern. So if you're photographing around cattails and dead grass and things you'd typically see around wetlands, that'd be a great pattern as well. And so I own patterns of all different kinds. And really, when I'm going out to shoot pictures of wildlife, depending on the kind of pictures I am taking, I try to match the pattern to the wildlife. Jeff, to clarify Jeff's statement from earlier when he asked about when he made the mention of the Olympus 150 to 400 millimeter pro lens, it's white. He was referring to the lens coat itself. So back to since I know to the clarification on that, Jeff, on the lens coat that I use on my lenses, and on my big 500 millimeter, and I've got a 300 millimeter 2.8. I've had those coats on there. That 500 millimeter f4 I've probably owned for maybe close to 15 years now. And I took it off not long ago, maybe 6 months ago, and it's protected the lens well. It didn't leave any kind of residue or cause any problems. And then Kamal asked the question, you think black or camouflage lens coats is better for concealment? I think either one, especially if you've got a white lens, just to cover it up. I like the way camouflage looks, so I always pick camouflage. So it's really a personal preference. And then Kathy asked, where do you buy the neoprene covers? You can buy them at, I believe it's lenscoat.com. I know B&H Photo sells them. If you just look for lens coat or neoprene covers, there's a lot of different manufacturers that make, I say a lot, there's a few different manufacturers that make those. And so it's just depending on finding the right one to fit your lens, because they're made specifically to fit a specific lens. And so you've got to find the ones that are cut right for your lens so they'll work correctly. And Robert Shea says, so my blue pastel Columbia sun shirt would pass your test. If we're taking pictures of fish, Robert, it'd be great. But for other wildlife, it might stand out just a little bit. But I've got the same shirt now. That's a great looking shirt. So yeah, this big mule deer buck that I took in the Texas Panhandle. I was wearing more of an open pattern camouflage when I shot that picture. And the amazing thing about it is, until the sun went down, I was front lit, so I wasn't in the shadows. The light was shining on me, but I was able to move slow enough and conceal myself to get that shot as well. I'm going to show you a video here in a minute, but one of the things I like to use a lot is ghillie camo. And if you don't know what a ghillie suit is, they're those stringy looking suits that snipers in the U.S. military wear to completely hide. If you've ever watched any kind of movie like American Sniper, or what shows on like Discovery or whatever, where they're talking about how snipers do their job, they wear ghillie suits. And again, it's just the traditional ghillie suits are strips of burlap that are kind of wound together on clothing underneath. You can buy more lightweight ghillie suits now that have just strings off of them. But the amazing thing about a ghillie suit, and I'll show you a video in a little bit that'll show you what a ghillie blanket looks like. But the amazing thing is about the ghillie suits is again, you can absolutely disappear in a variety of terrains. Now, that doesn't mean the other camouflage that we just spoke of is not good. But the ghillie suits, the good thing is you can hide anywhere. The bad part is they're a little bit cumbersome, and I never wear ghillie suits into the field because they hang on absolutely everything. So I'll have a bag that I'll carry mine in, and when I get to where I'm going to try to shoot pictures of wildlife like this coyote, I will actually take the ghillie suit out of the bag and then put it on right there and just sit down with it, so that way I'm not moving around. Because again, the plus is you can absolutely disappear with them. The downside is that when you're wearing a ghillie suit or using a ghillie blanket, they just hang up on everything, and it's a little bit cumbersome. But again, they're the ultimate concealment because they're so effective. I've called up I photographed bobcats and coyotes and almost every predator you can find around here. I've had raccoons literally walk a foot away from my feet while wearing a ghillie suit because it's just amazing how good you can disappear. And I didn't believe it at first, but when I first learned about ghillie suits was probably in the early 90s. I've got an older brother who's retired from the United States Army. And in one of his trainings, they had to learn how to make a ghillie suit. So he brought one home with me. And he said, I'm going to go hide within 20 yards of you. And it was going to be out in front of me. It was just an adult game of hide and seek. So I turned around. He walked within 20 yards of me, laid down. And when I first turned around and looked, and it was in pretty open country. He wasn't hiding behind a tree. He was laying down on the ground. And when I first turned to look, knowing he was there, I couldn't see him. And so I started walking around. And after a couple of minutes of looking, I finally found him. And that's when it convinced me how good ghillie suits can be, especially when it comes to their utilization in wildlife photography. And so I think my next slide. Yep. Let me switch over here. And like I said, tell me if this video works. We're going to watch a short video here. And so as we watch this, we'll,
Well, that was a pretty nice set. I've been to this pond before. Really didn't have a lot of success when I came last time because I didn't scout it properly enough. But this time I learned from my last mistake. I came here a couple of days ago, scouted it, figured out where I was going to set, and then that would give me the best opportunities to try to take pictures of wood ducks. I've got a lot of pictures of ducks in my portfolio, but of all the species, wood duck is probably my weakest link. I just don't have a lot of good pictures of them, and there's really no good reason why, but because I've had access to this spot for a while. But it took me a while to try to figure out what the best approach to photograph it was. And so I scouted it a couple of days ago, figured out where I was going to set up, came back this morning in the dark because the ducks don't roost here, they just feed here, and then worked my way to the east side of the pond, sat down at the edge of the water, just kind of used a ghillie blanket that I have and wore camouflage and just made a makeshift blind that would suffice for today and hope for the best. You know, what makes this pond so attractive to wood ducks is it's surrounded by woods. It's got, not only does it have mature oak trees that surround it, these water oaks surround the pond, it also has low-growing brush around the edges of it. And that makes it a challenge from a photography standpoint, but it makes it perfect habitat for these wood ducks, because what will happen is crows and blue jays and squirrels will get up in those oaks and they'll try to get acorns for themselves. And when they do, they knock acorns out and they fall in the water. You can sit here, I've been sitting here all morning and it sounds like someone's tossing rocks into the water, but what it is are acorns falling off these trees. And so those wood ducks will work their way into the brush and feed on those acorns and anything else they can find. So when I got here this morning, I brushed up my blind as best I could and got my spot ready. And all of a sudden the ducks started flying in. And again, they don't roost here, they feed here. And so the ducks started flying in from everywhere. So I went ahead and got sit down. It was dark, I couldn't take pictures, too dark to take pictures, but it was great listening to them in the dark. And as the sun came up, I noticed I probably had 100 wood ducks all around me. Some were just 4 or 5 feet away. They were just right at my feet. And that sounds like a good thing, but it's really not, because I had too many eyes looking at me. So every little move I made, someone was watching. And eventually they spooked, and they didn't fly off the pond. They just flew over on the back side of the pond, probably 50, 75 yards away. A little too far to photograph, but they were still over there. But here's one thing I've learned about birds of all kind. If you'll just settle down, don't make a commotion, they'll soon forget you're there. And as long as you're well hidden like I am right now, they'll come back. And so eventually they started coming back, and it was real foggy this morning. We've had warm days. The water's cold, but we've had warm days. So there's a lot of steam coming off the pond. In fact, my lens is a little bit fogged up right now because of the temperature inversions that are going on around this pond. And so it was pretty foggy this morning, which made for great video. I've got some pretty nice pictures of the ducks in the fog. But as the sun came up, I got some good opportunities. Are they award-winning shots? Probably not. Will they supplement my portfolio well? Absolutely. But it's a great opportunity, and it's always fun just to come out and sit and look for wildlife and wait on the birds to come by and just watch them in their natural habitat, and to be able, like I do, sit out in the brush and just be a part of the nature that's around me. And my setup is pretty simple. I'll just come in the morning, try to find me a brushy spot. I've got a little window here that's maybe 10 feet across that I can shoot through. There's brush on the left, brush on the right, so if the birds get on the either left or right of me, I've got some concealment. Straight out the front, it's pretty open, but I don't have a whole lot of wiggle room. And then I carry this ghillie blanket with me just to cover up my camera and my tripod legs, just to break up the pattern. But anyway, it's just great to come out here and sit. I'm going to stay about another 30 minutes, see what happens. The neighbors caused a little bit of commotion next door, and so all the ducks flew off, but a few are starting to kind of filter back in. So I'm going to see if a few more might come in, see if I can get another shot or two, see if my camera will unfog, and then just see what happens. But either way, had a great morning. It's been a great set, and I can't wait to come back to this spot again.
Okay, let me switch back over. Yeah, you can see in that video that ghillie blanket I use. And again, I've got a suit that's just like that, but that ghillie blanket, you can see how it's just made of a bunch of different strings. And a lot of times when I don't want to carry the ghillie suit, I'll carry that blanket and do what I did just now is wrap it around my legs. And my tripod actually becomes a makeshift blind right in front of me. And what's good about that setup that you just saw was right in front of me was really the only place I could take pictures because that's where the ducks were. Behind me, if something would have came from behind me, it probably would have seen me sitting there, even though I was wearing that kind of brown camouflage that blended with my surroundings. Still, I was using the concealment of that ghillie blanket just to hide me from those ducks. And those ducks have good eyesight. Again, when I mentioned in the video that the problem was early on, those ducks were just a few feet from me, and I had all kinds of eyes looking at me. So I had to wait for them to move off and then kind of filter back a few at a time for me to ever get any good shots of them like that. But it worked out good. So again, that's a good illustration of why the ghillie blankets work so good. And I think if you go on Backcountry Journeys blog, I did a video about a month or so ago about coyotes, and I was wearing a ghillie blanket in that one as well. And so, which also brings up our next point, and that's talking about blinds. And I've got another video to show you here. And blinds are one of my favorite ways to take pictures. And so you've got several types of blinds that exist. You got portable blinds, which I'm a big fan of. I'll show you a video that features a portable blind here in a minute. And then you have build in the field blinds. I do that a lot. You know, that's like we talked about on the last video, kind of building the field as you show up, depending on what your situation is and where you're going to sit. You just use a few sticks and grass and brush and anything else you can kind of collect to build something that you can hide behind. It doesn't have to be extensive. It doesn't have to be a fortress that you hide behind, but with a ghillie blanket and just a few well-placed sticks, that's a pretty good little build in the field blind that takes no time to set up. Because again, the strategy is when you get to where you're going to take pictures, especially if you're talking about truly wildlife, when you get to where you're going to take pictures, the last thing you want to do is be moving around a lot and let all the animals in the area know where you're at. So, the strategy is to move in, get set up as quick as you can, and then sit down and be quiet and wait for things to show up. And then there's permanent blinds. On my last property I actually built a permanent blind because, and they're my least, I like the blind aspect of them. And I'll tell you why I like blinds in a minute. But the permanent blinds are my least favorite aspects because either you build one or you buy one commercially and they just sit in one spot and they're immovable. But where I had the luxury on my last property that I owned was I had a sendero, which in Texas is what we call a lane that you clear through the brush. So it had a sendero across the property. And I knew where turkeys every day, they would fly down off the roost and they would move across the sendero over to feed out in the pasture for the rest of the day. And so I put a permanent blind on that sendero. And the reason why I built it so big, it would hold 4 people. So I could sit in there with people and we could photograph wildlife at the same time. And it worked pretty good in that regard. And then you can't mistake the importance of using a vehicle as a blind, because probably my most effective blind, hands down, that I've ever used is a vehicle, and just driving around and shooting pictures out of the windows. The reason why I like blinds is, even if you include vehicle blinds, not so much building the field, but the portable, permanent, and vehicle blinds, the reason why I like those so much is because it makes the weight a lot more bearable. As I get older, I'm getting more and more patient with that, being able to sit there and wait, but it's still pretty nice to, especially when it's getting warm like it is now, to be able to sit in a blind. You can sit in shorts and a t-shirt, not wear camouflage. You can take a book in to read, or if you've got cell service, you can, read a book on there, or even with the volume turned down and closed captioning, watch videos and just do things to keep yourself entertained until the action happens. And that's the reason why I enjoy using blinds so much, is because you can live more of I can take my laptop in. I do a lot of writing for magazines. And so it allows me to take my laptop in the blind with me, and I can sit there comfortably and watch the animals all around me and just sit amongst nature, but sitting inside these little blinds and be able to get some work done as well. So it's my way of multitasking in the field. And you can see there's more of a, I mean, that picture was purposeful. That was actually for a editorial shoot I did, but that's more of a permanent blind that's manufactured. They're just deer hunting blinds is what they are, that you can buy, and they work reasonably well for photography. I have used deer hunting blinds extensively for photography, and they work pretty good, especially when you're going onto someone's property who may hunt the property and the blinds are already in place and you just use what they have there. And then, upper right's kind of building the field, and the lower right is just a picture of a red wolf that I took that really doesn't have much to do with any of the blind part. But here, let's watch another video real quick. And oops. Let me get it switched over real fast. Here we go.
I've been wanting to make this video for a couple of weeks now, but I just haven't had the time. I've had a lot of other things going on. Sitting for the first time on this wetland on a property I bought back in December, and one of the things that appealed to me about the property is it had this man-made wetland in one of the corners of the place. One of the cool features about this is not only is it good for the birds, the wading birds and the ducks and waterfowl. We've seen some beaver activity. I haven't seen either one of those yet, but walking in just now, I saw a great horned owl, got some nice pictures of it on my way in. But this place again, it's just it's this water maybe a foot and a half deep at the very deepest, and it was designed that way. Every year during the rainy season it fills up with water, and then this time of the year when it starts getting hotter and drier, it'll dry up and then vegetation will grow back in. So it creates that natural wet and dry cycle that you see in a lot of natural wetlands, and again, the wildlife just flocks to it. So it's a little windy today. One of the things that I'm sitting in this pop-up blind, and the fact that it's windy means this blind is moving around a lot, and that may be affecting why the birds aren't coming in. But anyway, it's worth a set and worth kind of a scouting trip just to see what's going on out here. And I'm gonna sit out here about an hour longer. It's about an hour till sunset, and just see what all I can see, and hopefully get pictures of something. If anything, these egrets, if they come in, they're beautiful birds. If not, maybe get lucky and see an otter or a frog or a snake or something like that, because there's all kinds of stuff that lives here. One of the key ways I like working with wildlife like this, especially on new places, are just using these little portable blinds. And these things set up in about 5 seconds, literally. They take no time to set up. And the best practice is when you're using them is open windows that are perpendicular to each other. If you open the window behind you, the sunlight shines through and the animals can see in and see you moving around. So if you open them perpendicular, you can see out more than one side, and you get a little bit of breeze blowing through. It's pretty warm today. It's in the 80s. And so if I had both windows closed, I wouldn't be having much of a breeze. And so with this, at least I get a breeze. I can see if anything's coming from my left or to the south. I can look back to the west, watch the wetland, and so hopefully something comes in soon. So just now something remarkable happened. I wasn't paying attention. I was actually looking in a different direction, and one of the egrets flew down from the trees around this wetland and landed just right in front of me. And he was a little way out at first, but as it waded through the wetland, it was catching crawdads and catching tadpoles and just really feeding a lot in here. And it worked its way kind of in a big U shape. It went from left to my right, and then it circled back just right in front of me, just maybe 15, 20 feet away, and eventually saw me and flew back up into the tree. It'll probably be back in just a little bit because the food is too good here for it not to be back. I don't think he knew what it was. I just think he saw something that he didn't recognize that was out of the ordinary, because my camera, I was so close to him, he couldn't help but see me, but my camera was moving. But one of the remarkable things I'd never witnessed before, and it appears to be cooperative hunting, because as the egret was wading through the water, I kept noticing these dark discs moving around it. And at first I thought they might be catfish, but what they were is, for some reason, the turtles were following the egret around in the water. And I don't know if that's that the egret is stirring things up and is creating food for the turtle to eat, or what was going on. But I bet you there was probably 10 or 12 little paper plate sized turtles that were following that egret all around in this wetland. And when it flew off, they hung around for just a little bit. But again, I didn't get any video of it because it really happened right before the egret flew off when I first noticed it. But it was a pretty remarkable sight to see nonetheless. It's almost dark, and it's time for me to head back because the light's getting so low. It's not really, it's worth watching animals, but I won't get any photographs. But Josh, you want to talk about someone whose mind has been changed? You know, there's been so many times I've seen those egrets just walking around in the water, and to me they were just kind of a big, slow bird, and I wouldn't even take the time to take pictures of them. But the hour I spent out here tonight and got to see them and the way they interact with this wetland, and just how dynamic an animal they are, and the way they hunt for crawdads and little frogs, and the way that the turtles kind of come up around them. And I think I figured it out. I think when they're eating whatever they're eating, like in this case, these egrets were eating a lot of crawdads, I think they'll spill bits of it in the water, and that's what the turtles show up to eat. So the turtles aren't hunters, they're scavengers, it looks like. I was able to get a little bit of video of that, but it's just remarkable to come out here and watch them, and just to think this is literally in my own backyard. My house is under construction, and it's literally 400 yards across the pasture from here, and so this is going to be a special place as time goes on, and I get to spend more and more time on it, and just to see the nuances of this wetland when it turns from a wetland to a dry spot during the summer, and see what kind of animals utilize it, and then back again in the winter when it fills back up with water, and to see what all kinds of not only bird life but mammal life utilizes this place. So my first hit on the blind, I'm going to say it's a pretty good success. I got a lot of good action shots of birds set up great at eye level with the birds. The birds were a little bit backlit. This is really probably, from a technical photography standpoint, this is probably a better place to photograph in the morning because the sun will be at my back. But we had some overcast today with just enough light to backlight these white birds, so it really made it all work.
There we go. So that's why I like blinds so much, especially those portable blinds. Those things, if you notice it in the aerial shot on that video, they're not very big. I mean, there may be a couple of feet on each side of you when you're sitting in the middle of them, but they're super lightweight. They cost, I have about like 5 or 6 of those blinds, and they cost literally like $50 a piece. You can buy those at the online retailers as well, Cabela's or Bass Pro, and just look up pop-up blind. And you can buy them on there really, really cheap. But the thing about them that works so effectively, especially on birds, is when you sit down in one of those things, birds are oblivious to you. I mean, I don't know what it is about those blinds, but birds apparently, since they can fly away, most of them can, they don't really pay attention to if something changes in their environment because their environment's always changing. Now with the pop-up blinds, if you set one up new, a lot of times, especially if they're really wild animals like deer and coyotes and bobcats, they'll notice it and they may shy away from it a little bit. So in that case, that's why when I'm taking pictures of coyotes and predators and even deer, I prefer to wear a ghillie suit so I can blend in a lot better. But for comfort and bird photography, nothing beats one of those portable pop-up blinds like I was photographing out of there. So does anybody have any questions or comments as I move forward on this? Think we're good? Oops. Let me get up here to. So my next strategy. Oh, that's actually a picture of a coyote I took out of a permanent blind. That blind I was talking about on that property that I used to have before I moved a couple of years ago. It was that permanent blind, and that was actually taken one morning on that as that coyote crossed that sendero in just fantastic early morning light. That's a shot I got from it. And what's cool about that is that's literally probably 75 or 100 yards behind my house. And so what's really neat, if you whether you live in a suburb or whether you live in the country like I do and have some acres, if you take care of whatever wildlife is around you, that wildlife will be there a lot. Like on my property right now, I wish I had a list for you. I might share that with y'all one day on a webinar, but of all the species of birds, mammals, I'm still working on the reptile amphibian list. I mean, even in this whole list isn't complete, and just plant and tree species that are on this 40 acres of land that I own. It's pretty incredible, the diversity of species that you have here, especially when you purposely try to do things that will manage for that wildlife and give them a reason to want to be either in your backyard or on your property at large. And I might go back and do this if you guys want to see it. Y'all tell me. I've got another video to show here that's really talks about using vehicles as a blind. That's pretty common sense. So I was going to skip that one, but if y'all want to see it towards the end, certainly tell me, and we can watch that as well. These are a trio of turkeys that were taken out of a pop-up blind. Again, it looks like they're looking at me, but there's actually a hen that you couldn't see off to the right of this frame. And it's just remarkable, especially this time of year when turkeys are strutting and they're showing off like they do, the kind of iridescence that you can get, and just the scenes you see. I could watch this every single day and never really get tired of seeing this at all. Robert asked the question, what's your favorite bug spray, cutters or off? I'm going to get to that in just a minute, Robert. That's actually part of it's a side part of what I'm going to talk about in a little bit on the strategy. So you jumped the gun a little bit, but I'll answer that question on this slide here. Don't forget the nose. Now, everything we've talked about to this point all involves trying to hide visually from an animal. But the one thing about a lot of animals, especially mammals, a lot of them have really keen senses of smell. And so you've got to take that into account whenever you're trying to hide from animals. Key thing is, and this isn't always possible, the best day to photograph mammals, in my mind, especially if you're trying to get truly wild ones, are days that are overcast. Like here in Texas right now, or my part of Texas, it's overcast. Today'd be a good day to go out and try to photograph mammals, because the whole staying downwind becomes a whole lot easier when you're not worried about the direction from which the sun is shining. I argue with some of my hunter friends a lot, good-natured arguing, that it's harder to photograph a really big animal than it is to try to harvest one with a bow or a gun, just because you've got to keep the, with wildlife, with photography, not only do you have to keep the wind in mind, but you also have to keep the sun direction in mind. And so when it's overcast, I don't worry so much about the direction of the sun. I can stay downwind when possible. Because if you're trying to photograph a big white-tailed buck and he's truly wild and he catches wind of you, he's going to run off. And so mask your scent. So Robert, here's the answer to your question, and I was going to include this in this answer. I try not to wear any bug spray when I'm out, because I don't think that's a natural scent. And when I say I try not to, there's a caveat to that. That's not a real natural scent. And so if I can get by without wearing it, I try not to wear it, just because it may mask your human scent, but it's introducing a whole other scent into the atmosphere around you, into the environment around you. And so usually if I'm taking pictures of mammals, I try not to wear it. But birds, except for, unless I'm completely wrong about this, I think the only bird in North America that can smell is, I say the only bird, vultures can smell. So whether it's a turkey vulture, and I'm guessing like a California condor, they can probably smell, and black vultures, they can smell because that's one of the ways they find their food. But like turkeys and quail and stuff like that, they can't smell. So when I'm photographing just birds, I may wear bug spray, and it's usually off and no other reason, because that's what's most effective around here. And so, and when you're photographing like around the wetland, like I showed, if you live in the South, you know what I'm talking about. But ticks can be one thing, and I try to keep ticks off of me just from the whole Lyme disease aspect, or the Rocky Mountain spotted fever aspect. But really, the things that bother me more than ticks do are chiggers. And if you've never had a chigger before, a well-placed chigger bite will ruin your day. So bug spray comes along in handy for that. But again, if I'm trying to photograph mammals, typically I won't wear bug spray. If I'm photographing just birds, I will wear bug spray. But if you're photographing out of a permanent blind, like one of those hunting blinds I was talking about, not the portable ones, but the permanent ones, they do a pretty good job of keeping the scent inside of them. But if you're keeping the scent inside, it's pretty easy to keep bugs out too. So more often than not, I just won't wear bug spray. Oops, I left one part out. I'll mask the scent when you can. If you're really, really hardcore, and you've got to be willing to do this, but you can buy a variety of, and again, at outdoor retailers, you can buy a variety of scents that may smell like, it may have an acorn scent. Or if you're really into wildlife photography and trying to be invisible, not only to their eyes, but also their nose, you can buy a variety of cover scents, all the way from a skunk scent to really mask the whole area with the skunk smell. I mean, you've got to smell it too, but it'll mask the whole area with the skunk smell. Or if a tactic that hunters use a lot, if you're trying to photograph white-tailed deer during the rut, you can buy doe in heat urine that mimics a doe that's in estrus. That smell, a doe is in estrus, and it'll not only will mask your scent, it serves as somewhat of an attractant. So, I don't use those scents that much, but it's still, that's available to you. And so there's all kinds of masking scents that you can use, and a few of them are attractants, but for the most part, they're just trying to mask that human smell, because the smell of us isn't necessarily that natural, something animals are smelling every day. And the smell of the soaps that we use typically aren't something that they're smelling every day. And if you're really into it, you can buy laundry detergents as well as body soaps that are scentless, that you can buy at hunting retailers as well, that will help take the smell out of your clothes. A lot of times what I'll do, I'll wash my clothes in a scentless detergent that I buy. And then another tactic, I've been doing this for a long time, but just picking up leaves and sticks from a area, dried out leaves and maybe a little bit of dirt, and then sticking your clothes in a bag with those, like if I'm going to the oak woods, that it's about a mile north of where I'm at, a lot of oak trees there, I may pick up leaves and acorns and just stuff off the ground, litter off the ground, put them in a Ziploc, or not a Ziploc bag, a trash bag, and then I'll put my clothes in there in that trash bag, seal it all up, and leave it in there for a week or so, and let those clothes kind of infuse with that natural scent of the leaves and the earth and the acorns and everything else that's in there, and then wear them like that. It's not an offensive smell to me. It's actually a nice smell, but it helps mask your odor as well when you're out. And you can even buy clothes too. And I'm going on and on about this, but on scent control, you can even buy clothes too that are charcoal activated, that will hold your scent and help mask your human body scent as it wafts out into the environment around you. So that's why you can't forget the nose. And again, if you're trying to shoot pictures, particularly of mammals, for anything from a big whitetail like the one on the left to even jackrabbits. I've had jackrabbits smell me when I'm sitting in the blind, and they as soon as they get downwind of me and catch my wind cone, my scent cone as it's blowing away from me, then they'll spook off. And then there's a mule deer on the move there, jumping a fence. Does anybody have any questions so far? I'm towards the end of my presentation. Does anybody want to watch that other video that I'm showing you, or just kind of give me a little bit of input and we'll do whatever. We got a little bit of time left. We got one more video again. Jeff says the old Army chemical suits are good for the charcoal in them and used by a lot of hunters. Yeah, they are. I mean, you don't have to buy the old Army chemical suits. There's a couple of companies now called Scent Lock and Scent Blocker that make those charcoal activated suits that help mask human odor. James wants to see the video, so does Stan. So okay, let's watch a video. I'm going to switch over real fast. This one is about using the vehicle as a blind. So let's watch this one.
If you've watched the show before, you know one of my favorite ways to photograph wildlife is to get up in the morning and just cruise back roads where you're likely to see animals. This morning I'm out in far west Texas in the southern end of the Davis Mountains. There's all kinds of wildlife out here. There's some pronghorns in the field to my left. A little far out, there's a scaled quail on the post. So my technique is pretty simple. Just get up, drive around slow, keep my eyes open, try to find wildlife when they're out first in the morning, moving around, trying to feed, trying to get water, and even calling for mates like the blue quail is. I'm going to sneak back down there and see if I can get a photograph of them. Small birds and other wildlife is sometimes hard to spot. So the best tip for cruising for wildlife is to just drive slowly. When you're photographing wildlife from a road like this, I really think it goes without saying that you got to not only have your eyes open for wildlife, but you also really need to be aware of the traffic around you. I never just pull right off the side of the road. If I'm going to pull off, I'm going to commit, get well off the road, because the last thing I want to do is to create a hazard for people who are trying to just get to work or get back to their homes. So again, I try to, if I see wildlife, I'll make sure there's no cars behind me, signal plenty of time, get off the road, and just try to create a safe environment, not only for the animals, but also for me and the other people around. Just seconds later, I saw one of the animals I was seeking. Seeing those javelinas just now was a real treat. Javelinas are pretty common in Texas, but they're not real common where I live, so I never see them. I mean, maybe once a year if I'm down south or southwest, I'll see javelinas, but not that often. The crazy thing about those critters are they look like pigs, but they're not pigs at all. Javelinas are actually unique species all their own and are members of the peccary family. There are 3 species of peccaries that range from the southwestern U.S. to South America. The only species found in the United States is the collared peccary or javelina. Within a 2-mile stretch of road and probably over the past half hour, I've seen pronghorn antelope, I've seen burrowing owls, a lot of different songbirds, scaled quail, javelina. But again, it just goes to show if you get out in the mornings and drive around and you just visit places where wildlife exists, you can see all kinds of stuff. And luckily for me, the javelinas and the burrowing owls and everything else, it's right alongside this highway that I'm on. Not a real busy highway at all. Matter of fact, it's hard. I've probably seen 10 cars all morning, but there's just enough cars that come by every day that the animals just get used to seeing cars. So
Even though when I pull off to the side of the road, they may get a little bit skittish, but as long as I move slow and I'm calm and I don't really try to make any sudden noises, and most importantly, I don't get out of the vehicle, they'll calm down, hang out like those javelinas. I mean, they were 10, 15 yards from the vehicle. And again, they knew I was there, but they just weren't very upset at the fact that I was there. And so I was able to get some pretty good shots. Right now I can hear a scaled quail. It sounds like he's behind me, calling. And hopefully I'll drive back down there and find him from a fence post. But I hope you like this show. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to send me an email. And I can't wait for you to see the next wildlife photo show. All right, that was it. And you know, I'm watching that video right there, and I'm going to editorialize just a little bit. And man, it isn't going out and shooting pictures of wildlife so much fun. I mean, I'm lucky enough that I get to do it for a living, but gosh almighty, the cool thing about shooting pictures of wildlife is it's also my hobby. When I don't have to go out and take pictures of it, it's still what I do for fun when I'm not taking pictures of it. And just to watch that video, I haven't watched that video in a while, but just to watch that video and realize how much fun it is just to get out and just to see stuff like that. It's so incredible. And Robert asked, do you use the sunroof to stand up or just out the windows? I just shoot out the windows. I don't have a sunroof on my vehicle. And I use the windows for a couple of reasons. One, it puts me more at eye level with the wildlife. If you've noticed all these pictures I take, I try to be at least eye level with all the animals I take. And so if I were to shoot out of a sunroof, it elevates me a little bit higher. Actually the best vehicle, and I don't own one, but when I've been on trips and rented cars before, I have pickups, you probably assume that being from Texas, because you're issued a pickup at birth, whether you have one or not here in the state. And so I drive a pickup, but when I rent a car, when I go out somewhere, I like to rent cars just because they sit a little bit lower, especially if I'm going to try to do photography like that. And I also use, and I see questions coming in, I'll get your questions. I also use it's called a molar bag, and there's a few different manufacturers that make those, but it's pretty much like a bean bag that sits on your window sill. And that's what I use to rest my lens on, just to stabilize it instead of using a tripod. And it works. They work remarkably well. They work better in my opinion. I know you can buy window mount like tripod heads. I don't like those. I use those, again, what I use is called a molar bag, like a molar tooth in your mouth, molar bag. And they come empty. You fill it with whatever. I go to our local Tractor Supply and buy bird seed to put in the bags. But those bags are great for just putting your camera on top of it. It stabilizes them. So that's what I use. And then the next comment, Sandra says, I own a camouflage tent so huge to haul out on the trail. It is. Look into those pop-up blinds, Sandra. They're, again, 50 or 60 bucks. They're pretty small. They're good for one person, but they weigh maybe 5 pounds, and they've got a little backpack bag that you can carry them in out on the trail. And so that's what I use, and they actually work best. And then Jeff says, a bean bag or mount that will attach to your windshield are good accessories you use when using your vehicle. Yep, that's what we just talked about. And Jeff said vans are good too, as you can slide the door open and shoot out the side. Works pretty well. That does work pretty well, Jeff. And yeah, good questions and good comments, and thanks everybody for sharing right quick. I've got one more video. If y'all want to see it, I can show it too. Just let me know that as well if you want to hang around. I know we're running out of time, but if you want to hang around, I actually loaded up 4 videos. I got one more that'll show just some shooting out of a blind and how effective it is in the pop-up blind. But if you want to stay in touch, I always answer emails when I get them. So there's my email address, russell@russellgraves.com. And then you can also, Jeff says, love to see it. Let me finish this, and I'll play the last video I've got loaded up in the system. And if you want to see more of these videos, I've got probably 21 or 22 online right now. There's I've got 5 or 6 more that I'm about to release soon. So if you want to watch more videos, kind of behind the scenes stuff and how I do what I do, feel free to go check that out, wildlifephotoshow.com. Not trying to sell you anything over there, but it's just trying to share the love, my love of photography with like-minded people. Because one thing I didn't mention at the first that I mentioned from time to time is you are looking at the entire photography enthusiast community of Dodge City, Texas. There is nobody else around that likes doing wildlife photography like I like to do it. So whenever I find a group of people who are like-minded, I can talk all day long about photography and wildlife photography in particular. So if you're inclined, go over there. You can sign up for updates, and I don't spam you with anything. Whenever I release a new video, you get an automatic update that a new video is out if you want to go take a look at it. So with that said, let me pop over here and I'll load that last video. And this is a really cool project that I worked on almost a year ago. And I think you're really going to like this one here. Again, shooting out of a blind, but I think you'll like the project at large and what it's all about.
As I walk, I'm going to try not to talk too loud because this evening I'm actually on a ranch in Northeast Texas, and I've been tasked with trying to get photographs of some California valley quail. And you may be thinking, California valley quail, kind of out of place there in Texas. Well, that's kind of the point. There's a local university, Texas A&M Commerce, and Dr. Kelly Reyna is doing a research project to try to gauge the efficacy of turning loose these California valley quail in place where bobwhite quail have long been extirpated. And so this ranch has beautiful habitat. It's in really good shape. And last night when we came out to scout the birds, we actually saw quite a few in this area where I'm setting up. So where this fence kind of makes this corner, there's a lot of birds kind of moving through this corridor. I think probably this is a better morning setup than an evening setup because the sun will come up back to the east. But now we've got this row of trees right along where I'm set up, and we're in good even shade. And so if the birds come in, I'll be able to get some nice photos. So I'm going to get in the blind. I'm going to set up for, maybe an hour, see what comes out. And then hopefully these birds will be doing the same pattern they were last night and traveling through this corridor. So if I see them, they should be 10, 15 yards away and should be close enough to get some nice shots. So we'll just see what happens. I got set up in the blind, and so far no quail, but it's still a little bit early. I think they haven't started going to roost yet, so I think we still have time to see a few birds. What's cool about this time of night, especially in this part of Texas, you start hearing the barred owls calling one another as the evening comes, as evening is upon us. And it's a little bit hot in the blind right now, if I'm being honest with you. We've got a northeast wind, so the wind's coming from behind me, but my back window's closed because I've got my southwest and northwest windows open, so it doesn't have much of a cross breeze coming through here. But it's tolerable. It's not too bad. But I'm just sitting here with my typical setup. If you've watched any of these videos before, I suggest if you're using these pop-up blinds, which are good tools, by the way, that you always have windows that are perpendicular to each other open. So I'm sacrificing my view to the east. I'm sacrificing my view to the northeast, just because if you've got windows that are parallel to one another that are open, you'll be essentially silhouetted through the two windows. So if you keep two windows just perpendicular to one another and kind of sit behind those windows in the shadows, you can pretty much go undetected by really, I think, most birds.
So what's the big deal with bobwhites? In a nutshell, grassland bird populations in North America are in a free fall. According to Audubon, grassland species are among the most imperiled group of birds in the United States. Total populations have declined by more than 40% since 1966. California valley quail are a more resilient bird than the bobwhites. They've been successfully transplanted all over the world, and if Reyna's hypothesis proves true, the sound of a quail that's new to Texas may be heard soon. Meanwhile, on this patch of northeast Texas prairie, the California valley quail make an appearance. I can't believe that just happened. I was sitting here in the blind just enjoying nature in front of me, hoping a deer or a pig would walk out in this long lane that's in front of me. There's a separation between the fence line and the trees to the north of it, and I was hoping something would step out there. But out of nowhere, I heard two birds fly down, and I knew by the sound, because I've heard it before, that they were quail. And they literally landed probably 5 feet to my left, just right behind the blind. And I could hear them, and they were really close, but I cracked the window on the blind and looked out, and they were just right there. And so they took forever feeding back there, and I thought they weren't going to come around. Well, finally, they started walking behind the blind, and then they walked around the corner of it, and they were so close. I couldn't even grab my phone off the floor to try to video them. They were just right 2 feet from the blind, just right there, and I couldn't get. And it's exciting, but it's frustrating that you just can't get a picture of them. And so eventually, luckily, they went off to the northeast, and then it was a male and female together, and they kind of hung around. I was able to get a few shots, not really what I wanted, but a few shots nonetheless. And then they started leaving. Well, about that time, another bird came in, a male, and he stood around for a while. Well, then the other male and female saw it and then came back. So they milled around maybe 15, 20 feet away from me for a while out my side window, and I didn't have my seat positioned correctly, so I struggled to get pictures at that angle, but they were so close I couldn't move my seat around. And so they eventually moved right in front of me. I was able to get the camera moved around. I was in good position because I set up to shoot to the southwest anyway, and they just stayed out there for 10 minutes, and a cardinal came in, and it was so exciting. It's just so lucky that the first night of this project I was able to get some really nice shots of these birds. And again, this is a project that's being worked on by Dr. Kelly Rain at Texas A&M University in Commerce, my alma mater, I'm proud to say. He's with the Department of Agriculture and Wildlife Sciences, and they're doing a project in East Texas to try to see if they can translocate California valley quail into suitable habitats in this part of the state. Part of the state, by the way, that the bobwhite quail have been decimated in, and just to see if just a little variability in the habitat, the California valley quail can make this a nice home. And early indications, according to Dr. Reyna, are so far so good. The quail are taken to this habitat and they love it. And I saw it tonight. These birds are just thriving, and I was so proud to be able to be out here. And it's such a blessing to be asked to work on this project with them and be out here to try to photograph these birds. Originally I'd planned to be out here for 2 or 3 weeks, almost every evening and a lot of mornings over that time. But if I have to quit today, I'm in good shape, but I'm going to come out a few more times this week, come out a couple times in the morning, and see if I can't get some more really nice shots of these birds. It's just so awesome. And I don't know if you guys noticed or not, but in that video, the male actually had a band on its leg, and the female had a radio collar that was mounted to her chest. And what actually mounted to her chest? They wear like a collar, but it was mounted on her chest. And so that's that project's kind of neat. Well, what's really neat about it is I live straight line distance across the big creek that runs through this county, and as the crow flies, I live about 15 miles from that ranch, and about a month later, I started seeing some of those California valley quail just right around where my property is, and so it's kind of neat to see that. And I haven't talked to Dr. Rain in a couple of months, but it looks like that project's doing good, because last year they had some of those birds that were actually making nests and setting nests. So again, that's the beauty of wildlife photography, is just to go out and get to see stuff like that. So Brenda says, I can't hear you. I'm not sure what's going on there, Brenda, because I've got everything turned back on like I have had it. But anyway, we're kind of at the end of my presentation anyway. If you guys have any questions, just feel free to send me an email and stay in touch. And I look forward to seeing everybody. I'm actually off to go photograph in Yellowstone next week with the Backcountry Journeys tour. So I haven't looked at the guest manifest, so I hope some of you guys that are in this group today and on this presentation are there with me. I'm doing Yellowstone this week, and I've got a few days off, and I'll be back in Yellowstone again and Grand Tetons towards the end of the month. So, and again, we're out looking for great wildlife shots and great nature shots. So I hope you guys are with me. And again, thanks for being here today. I appreciate everybody's attention, everybody's time. And if I don't see you on the next trip, hopefully I'll see you on the next webinar, which may be I think it's a few weeks from now. But I'll be back. We had a question just come in. That's why I paused. What was it Jeff mentioned for a blind? I think Jeff was mentioning for the bean bags or the window mounts for the vehicle, Sandra. So I think that's what he was mentioning. So if we don't have any other questions, I think that's the end of my presentation. And again, appreciate everyone listening in. Hope you learned something and hope you got some great insights. And I'll talk to you guys soon. Take care.